Today, Jan and I will be confronting Georgetown University's dark past and how it's dealing with its ties to slavery. Without a doubt, American institutions of higher learning are on all of our minds right now as we finish applications, await decisions, or maybe take that SAT one last time. I'm sure all of you have heard of, if not applied to, Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Boasting globally recognized academics and athletics, Georgetown has established itself as one of the most prestigious and competitive universities in the country. Despite the name that the Hoyas have built for themselves, there lies a troubled past that has recently been brought to light. In 1838, an effort to save the university during a period of struggle, the school's Jesuits orchestrated a massive slave sale in order to keep Georgetown afloat. These 272 slaves were shipped to plantations in the Deep South, which had a notoriously brutal history in regards to the treatment of its slaves. After this incident was brought to light by students and professors alike, Georgetown's staff was weighted with a decision. What reparations, if any, should be offered to the descendants of these slaves? Since the issue has been introduced, Georgetown has responded by offering a formal apology, creating an institute for the study of slavery, building a memorial to the slaves who it profited from, renaming campuses, and offering an advantage in admissions to the descendants of all slaves whom the university profited off of. Now, Jan and I look to analyze whether or not these reparations are sufficient.
So what Brad and I are looking into is whether Georgetown made sufficient reparations to the descendants of the slaves that Georgetown sold back in the 1800s. You must keep in mind how these slaves were treated and whether they gave enough to the descendants or not. After extensive research that Brad and I completed, we found it evident that the torture that the African Americans endured not only in the Deep South but throughout the nation was terrible. Georgetown's Jesuits have not made sufficient reparations for the slavery that they participated in the slave trade. The victims of Georgetown's participation with slavery should be entitled to more benefits. Their descendants should be given more money and more help if they should be and are admitted to the university.
After doing extensive research, Jan and I have pinpointed several key resources that we'd like to focus on in our project. We'll be utilizing a scholarly article from the New York Times by Rachel L. Swarns, and this provides a basic overview of the situation, giving the before, during, and after of the issue. It'll provide us a strong platform to work off of in order to be knowledgeable of the issue. In addition, we chose to use a video segment as well from PBS News. This piece of film also offers a good overview of the topic and offers several different perspectives from key people to get a better insight on the issue. Next, we analyze an article from the Daily Caller that deals with the opposition to Georgetown's actions. Individuals, and many of them, are calling for a $1 billion fund for these descendants. Although Jan and I believe this is a little bit extreme, considering Georgetown only has an endowment of $1.5 billion, Georgetown still definitely should be doing more and should set aside funds for these descendants. In addition, Jan and I utilized an article from The Atlantic, which greatly helped us prove our thesis. The article criticizes Georgetown for not doing enough, and it stresses that Georgetown's efforts seem forced. In addition, the article condemns Georgetown for simply giving the same admissions priority to these descendants as they would to the children of alumni. This simply isn't enough.
Brad and I also utilized an opinion piece that was written on CNN, where it analyzed an alumnus, Dorothy A. Brown, who is now a law professor at Emory University, and it analyzed whether she would have attended Georgetown had she known about the 272 slaves that were sold. She, along with the university, questions what she is in debt to the descendants of these 272 people because she received her law degree from Georgetown, and knowing that these people were sold into slavery does not sit well with her, and that's how she got her law degree, because of these people.
The thematic core that Jan and I will be focusing on is redemption. And without a doubt, Georgetown does need to redeem itself from these evils that it's been associated with. And how can this best be done? Why has Georgetown not done enough? And what can be done further to address the issue?
Brad and I will be utilizing Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs because we feel that this novel effectively captures the experience of a victim of slavery. As we compile more research and prepare our final work, we feel that this piece will reflect all the years of hard work that the African American people endured, and the torture that they endured and the suffering they had to go through, and that it cannot be forgotten. And we used a quote If you want to be fully convinced of the abominations of slavery, go on a southern plantation and call yourself a Negro trader. Then there will be no concealment, and you will see and hear things that will seem to you impossible among human beings with immortal souls. We felt that this really hit home because that all of this was occurring on the southern plantations, and we feel that this novel really captures it all in one book. In addition to incidents in the life of a slave girl, Brad and I will be utilizing the film 12 Years a Slave, which is based off the book. And we feel that the film will help us to capture and to drive home our point that what happened to these slaves and how they were treated, how terribly it was, and how it can never happen again. And we believe that the clip we were using provides one of the most poignant examples of how poorly they were treated and the suffering they went through. Because Solomon really, he was a northerner now. He was free. But the people in the South didn't believe that, and they still treated him like a slave. So the fact that this is just a basic example of what they went through, the whole film is filled with scenes like this, and we realize it cannot happen again, and that this plays a role in the fact that descendants should be given more than what they were given by Georgetown because of what their ancestors went through.
Well, boy, how you feel now?
My name is Solomon Northup. I'm a free man, a resident of Saratoga, New York, the residence of my wife and children who are equally free, and you have no right whatsoever to detain me.
You're not any free
And I promise you upon my liberation, I will have satisfaction for this wrong.
Resolve this. Produce your papers. You're no free man. And you ain't from Saratoga. You're from Georgia. You ain't a free man. You're nothing but a Georgia runaway. You're just a runaway nigger from Georgia. Are you a slave?
No.
So this connects to ethos because we feel that the media we utilize appeal to the ethical views of the audience because it should sympathize, the audience should sympathize with Solomon, who is depicted as a slave in our clip from 12 Years a Slave. And this is just how the slaves were treated. There's no other way to point it out, because this is how, and the fact that a Jesuit institution would put people through this is just an abomination to the Jesuits and to the country itself. And we feel that more must be done to pay back the descendants after all the suffering that their ancestors went through just for an institution to keep its doors open.
The next rhetorical appeal we're going to take a look at is pathos, and that's the emotional appeal. And we have to start by asking ourselves the question, how does the media that we have selected appeal to the emotions of the audience? And obviously the beating scene from 12 Years a Slave is incredibly disturbing. We see Solomon being mercilessly beaten, and he's not even a slave anymore. And you just have to put yourself in the shoes of Solomon and see and feel the fear that he must have felt during this time, and live that experience, then compare that to what these Georgetown descendants' ancestors must have faced. And next, the selection from the text of Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl further advances our point of how brutal slavery was, and the excerpt that we used really expands upon the Deep South and how brutal it was down there. And this is exactly where Georgetown sold its slaves to. It's very self-explanatory, and we get a good glimpse of what the horrifying conditions were down there.
So the next rhetorical device we're going to take a look at is logos, which is the logical appeal. Now, we feel that the movie clip from 12 Years a Slave should just go to show that the atrocities and the inhumane crimes and that the crimes against humanity that are being committed here are horrific, and the fact that this happened before is unbelievable to us. There's no way that anybody should be treated this way, especially coming from a Jesuit institution. Now, the quote from Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl also just states it right there when it mentions the immortal souls and how this happens among other human beings. And it's just, there's no way to describe the terrible crimes that were committed and against humanity, and the fact that this should never happen again.
Our final verdict is that Georgetown has not made significant reparations for slavery. The prioritized admission offered to these descendants is the same as what's offered to children of Georgetown alumni. This doesn't do the situation justice. They're getting the same as children of alumni. Compare that to what the horrors that these children's ancestors went through. Next, there's not enough money set aside for these descendants. As we've already said, $1 billion fund would be very excessive, but there needs to be a significant amount of money set aside for these descendants, considering what their ancestors went through. Finally, there's no additional support for these descendants after they're admitted to the school. They don't get any additional financial aid. They have no medium to talk about the institution's history with slavery if they do feel uncomfortable about it, which I'm sure that they do. And finally, no way to prioritize help for these students if they're struggling in school. There's no additional programs at the school that can help to reach out to these descendants specifically. So in conclusion, Georgetown's efforts so far are forced and not sincere. The university would not have done anything had the issue not been brought to light. It's now a moral obligation for the university to set things straight and make the appropriate reparations.